Buongiorno Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca and to part 2 of my chat with the super knowledgeable and fun Savannah and Ashwin of unPINNED, an unconventional wine course and innovative venture. Last week we spoke about their story and how unPINNED was born. In this episode, we dig deeper into the wonderful world of wine and how unPINNED is bringing people closer to it in a relatable, non-pretentious, and truly revolutionary way. unPINNED is also offering $15 off annual membership for my listeners with the code 15withfosca. Like what you're hearing? Subscribe and show some love in the comments. Grazie mille e buon ascolto. I want to talk a little more about the visual components of unPINNED, and I want to talk about Savannah and what you are doing specifically, what your role is. You guys are very present online. I love what you're doing. Talk to me about your vision for unPINNED.
Yeah, so it's really amazing because when we first came up with the idea of unPINNED, I started designing the concept with your standard business colors, very, red wine red and a yellow that emulated white wine and very kind of what the industry was doing, and we really realized that that wasn't who we were as people, as a company.
Right.
And so we sat down as a team and put some thought to who are we, who do we want to be, and how do we translate. And then I took that and translated it into a design, and we want to be young and bold and contrarian, and we want to be like fun, and all of those things are really critical to how we see wine. Mm-hmm. And it's also very different from all the other wine courses out there.
Totally.
You go on our website, you go to our Instagram, you know right away that things are fun. We have
It's true, though. It's true. It's
so
much fun.
Ashwin's got us he's making a silly, goofy face.
Yeah.
And we want people immediately to be disarmed and feel comfortable. And so that's what I do every day when I work on design for unPINNED is think, how can I continue to, in every single thing I design, contribute to our overall vision and energy and personality of the brand.
And I think it comes through, and I think it's so nice because your vision is completely encapsulating the company's message, right? And so you see these, bright colors, and Ashwin's there just having a good time, and but also saying it's all good, and gosh, we need that right now, and so I think for someone like me, actually, seeing your work and seeing what you do on social media, it's just like a nice pick me up, and I think but I think that I love what you've done creatively because you guys are true to your mission. So how can we be sort of taking on this industry that we think has done, damage to people, you know what I mean, damage in air quotes, but has somehow made them feel insecure about wine or made them feel like they don't really have enough of an understanding to be able to speak intelligently about it, right? So instead of doing that sort of standard, sleek, whatever, you're like, this is what we're about. And we want to share this with you. And so I think you've been incredibly effective in that communication.
Yeah,
and
we want to be open, and for us, wine is something, like we've said before, it's something to be enjoyed.
Right.
Something that brings people together. It's not about points. I mean, we would never think to rate on a point system people or a piece of artwork in an art gallery, but we are obsessed
with it.
And once you really get to know the industry, you realize it's all about marketing and money. The points are they're very rigged. Honestly, that's the secret. It's rigged, and
it bothers me so much because you go to a wine store in the U.S., let's say you go to a pretty, a large one. I'm from New York area. You guys are DC based, so you know the kind of store I'm talking about. You were DC based once upon a time. And you go in and, you look at the price, and then they have I won't name names, but they have the rating, a little thing, right? So you're there, and let's say you really don't know much of anything. Well, got it 98, or whatever. And so I don't know what that means, but okay. And I think it's even harder at restaurants because the prices are so high.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, can I share two quick things
Please,
on the points thing?
help us.
So I think one is it's like a funny story. I've tasted 200 or 300-point wines and I hated all three of them.
Really?
Yeah, I remember them so vividly. I was in a tasting in DC, I won't say where, and everyone's like kind of doing this, and it's in a room full of sommeliers because it was an industry thing, and everyone's like acting, they're just fawning over this wine, and I took a sip and I'm like, I want to spit this. Am I crazy?
No.
Or it was like, this is just bad. Like,
It's
this
happened
isn't.
to me.
This is straight up bad. It's a bad
And
wine.
nobody said anything?
No, nobody said
Did you
it.
say anything, or did you just?
I was just in the back of the room being like, all right, everyone's loving it. I guess.
I would have done the same thing, but I probably would have I would have tried to get.
I wish I had.
Yeah.
I wish I had. I didn't at that point. I was earlier in my wine
Right.
career. I was like, more than anything, I was like, I'm probably messing up. I'm probably not tasting it.
A lot of people think that. You see what I'm saying? And for example, like I've had wines in restaurants that I've had to send back.
Yeah.
When the wines
it's not right.
when it's not right.
Yeah.
But people are afraid.
Yeah.
But even if it's a $200 bottle of wine, it can taste like cork. It happens.
Well, for me, actually, it wasn't that it tasted like cork.
Right.
The wine wasn't flawed. It was just a bad wine.
You just didn't like the wine.
I just thought it was a bad wine. It was a California wine, and all I could taste was the frickin' barrel. I couldn't taste anything but the barrel. I was like, I'm chewing on wood chips here.
Oaky.
Like, why is this? Why is this good?
At a certain point, everything became oaky. You guys are too young for that, but in the 80s, things were oaky. Oakiness emerged.
Yeah. The other the thing on points that I think is important for folks to know if you care about wine is that they're really dangerous. They're like extremely dangerous because they change our consumption patterns. That most of us kind of know. We can understand that. That's dangerous to begin with. What's really harmful is they change what's getting made. So there are thousands of indigenous varietals out there that are going extinct because nobody wants
There's no demand.
There's no demand.
Right.
And there's no demand because they don't get points. And so this was another fundamental part of where unPINNED came from in our philosophy, which is we try to pour as much as we can from these underrepresented varietals because if you care about food and wine like we all in this room do, and I imagine many of your listeners do, it is such a shame that there's over 10,000 known wine grape varietals on Earth, and 20 grapes account for 99% of what we drink. Like when I learned that, I was like falling out of my chair.
It's pure madness.
Yeah, it's like there's so much cool stuff in the world, and we're kind of funneled into drinking these same, really just 8 grapes that account for most of it.
And from the same 10 countries.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know.
Less.
Less. And I
3.
loved that about your tasting. That and I want to talk a little more about the time you spent in, for example, Georgia and also Scotland. I find your choices interesting. I also want to know more about why you settled in Italy. I mean, it might be obvious to people, but it isn't that obvious to me because you did live all over the world and you had so many choices. But talk a little more about that, about the film, about the documentary, and about the book, In Pursuit of Flavor.
Yeah.
Also because what you just said is kind of like shocking to me.
It should be.
And I don't think a lot of people know, like
Most people don't.
most people don't, because I guess we just assume that's all we have, but there is so much out there. It's sort of like the whole way we're finally paying more attention to plants, and what, and their medicinal values and all those things. You both are like bringing these important pieces to people's, into people's homes, right?
Yeah.
We don't know about these things.
Yeah, it's again, this is why I carry some disdain for the industry, right?
Yeah.
Because like the average person, they're going to go to the store, they're going to look at the shelves, they're going to pick something, and they're going to go home. That's very normal. That's how you should do it. So then it's kind of up to the industry to make sure that what's on the shelves is reasonably representative of what's available in the world.
Yeah.
The fact that it's not is not any individual's fault that's going to buy the wine. It's 100% the industry that makes it that there's a ginormous section for California, there's a ginormous section for France, there's a reasonable section for Italy, but you will not find Hungary or Croatia or Slovenia or Georgia or Uruguay, like Greece. Yeah, we drink a ton of Greek wines. Like that's our, as in the industry's fault.
I tried some really great wines in Greece.
They're phenomenal.
And they're fantastic.
But you know what's happening? The
yeah.
winemakers are ripping up what tastes incredible, that's grown there for centuries. They're ripping it up and putting in a Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay, and that's not what the
It's
land
not
is supposed
indigenous,
to
and
grow, and
that's
so
not,
it tastes
should-
bad.
right.
And so it's this terrible cycle.
Yeah.
But I do think we can be a little angry frustrated at the industry, but what I find really exciting is as consumers, we can do little things by, taking the course or doing wine tasting, having the knowledge is power, knowing that, I typically only drink 20 grapes. Maybe I'll go to the wine store next time and see if I can find a grape varietal I've never heard of before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me try that, and with every wine we can purchase, we can kind of make that change.
Yeah, and I'll build on that. It's the reason why I think wine education is so important is I'm not an importer. I can't change what's going to be available, but we can change what people ask for. We can change what they want.
Yeah.
And then if people want it, they will show up on the shelves.
And they will, and they'll ask for it, and they'll go into their stores, and they'll say, why don't you stock any Greek wine?
And then they'll go ask their distributor, and the distributor will ask, the importer, and then eventually the wines will arrive. And so that's why we think education is so fundamental, especially in a world where people are scared to talk about stuff.
Yeah.
So if you feel empowered, if you're like, I kind of know what I'm doing in wine, and what I don't know, like, screw it. Like, if you carry that mentality, then all of a sudden you'll go try and name a wine that you can't pronounce.
Yeah.
Like, you'll see it's Uri Sapere, for example, from Georgia, and you'll be like, I don't know what the hell that is, but I want to try that because it's cool, and I don't know how to say it, but I'm going to learn.
Right.
So that's kind of that's one of the things.
I watched the trailer for the documentary, and I'm really intrigued, and I'm gonna watch it. I have to do like a whole VPN thing, but I'll get around to it. I didn't have time before the podcast. Is that something that you would like to do again?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to.
Do you guys have something in I don't want you to know major spoilers, but are there things that you're currently working on, or that you're excited about, or future projects that you want to share with our listeners?
It's really a fun question because I wrote the book and it never got published. So I wrote the manuscript, I finished it, and then I was working to get it published, and I was hitting roadblocks with. I was starting to get a lot of, we love your writing, but you need 100,000 followers before we'll publish you, which just was it's just sad as a writer.
Can I just tell, it's a sad, you've made me feel, thank you for saying that, because it's a sad world that we live in.
Yeah.
When your value is placed on, there are people who just show you how to eat a mango who have more than 100,000 followers, and I think what you're doing is much more important. I'm just saying, it's just sad that that's become, it's sort of like the point system for wines.
Yeah,
right?
It was a super downer because, as someone who, I think the written word is a beautiful thing, I honor it, I love writing, I love reading, and when I heard that, it just made me question everything that we have available to read, because people don't need to hear from famous people need to hear from other people that are like them. It's irrelevant to me what some famous person somewhere, someone that's got 300,000 followers, that's probably not who I need to be hearing from in order to become a better person. So that journey was really unpleasant. And as I was hitting that brick wall, and the crazy thing in all this was I got feedback from pretty reputable agencies saying we really like your writing, we love your book, just go build a platform and then we'll publish you. Yeah. And so while I was hitting that brick wall, I bumped into who ended up being the producer of the documentary at a pizzeria. And this was in Atlanta. And so we hit it off, and I kind of talked him through my world and wine, and then within a few months we were boots on the ground in Georgia, the country, and we were filming.
Amazing.
And so you'd asked what other projects are in the works. Right now it's a matter of we've created a bunch of things. We haven't really released it into the world in a big way. So we're in the phase of just putting it all out there, because the unpinned course it's long, or not crazy long, but it's good. It's dense, it's beautiful. The documentary it's a lovely story. You learn a lot of history. There's a narrative component.
And we'll put a link to it.
Great.
Okay. And I have to say though, so I just want to go back to Georgia for a second.
Yeah.
To the country.
Yeah.
Not to Atlanta.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yes. Because it's very interesting that you've chosen that country as your point of departure.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little more about that? And then something I haven't asked you both really seriously is, where does the love for wine come from for both of you?
Cool.
Where did it,
Yeah, which one should we answer first?
answer the Georgia one first,
Yeah.
and then tell me where the love comes from.
Yeah, so, for those that don't know, Georgia is the birthplace of wine. the oldest known evidence of winemaking on the entire planet is in Madanuli, Georgia. It's 8,000 years old, so predates writing by 3,000 years. So people were drinking wine around a fire for 3,000 years before they could even write their name on a stone or a leaf, or I don't know what the first thing they wrote on was. But it's amazing to me that if you were to just ask the average person, like, oh, where does sushi come from? They're like, oh, Japan, you know, like, or where do tacos come from? They're like, oh, probably Mexico.
Yeah.
But nobody knows actually that wine comes from Georgia.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Most
I'll
people
admit
don't.
it.
Most people don't know, and
I
it's
never really thought about it, but I guess I just assumed. I assumed ancient Greece, Egypt,
yeah. I
Mesopotamia,
had to until
right? I don't know.
I had to until somehow I learned about it, and all the wine curriculums and stuff. Like I had obviously formal wine training. We never really talked about Georgia. We picked up this encyclopedia of wine at one point. You know, it's like some hundreds and hundreds of pages. They have 2 pages dedicated to Georgia, the country, and it's
Probably 50 pages dedicated to France.
That's
yeah, more
appalling.
hundreds of pages to France,
Yeah,
and it's
that's appalling.
yeah, and there is no country in the world where wine is more fundamental to life and culture than Georgia. Like you think wine is important here in Italy, which it is. In Georgia, it's like 5 times more important.
Wow.
Everybody has someone in their family making wine. The country is 3 million people. There are over 100,000 registered family wineries.
That's
just
crazy.
Just think about that. I think that's 1 to 30
Yeah,
if I'm doing the
that's
math in my head.
crazy.
And that's registered, right? Like
registered. So
there's probably
everyone's
2 or 3
making
acts that
wine,
are just
right?
doing it in their
Everyone's
garage
just
without
It's
like
part of
Exactly.
their culture. If you don't have family wine to bring to an
Right.
occasion, it's like a dishonor.
It's like all
To
over
go
here.
buy,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To go buy a bottle of wine is, you have some uncle or grandfather or cousin
or you.
or you
Right.
doing it.
It's
And I think
amazing.
they have so many beautiful cultural traditions, and it's a country that is growing in terms of tourism. But when I first went there and when we went back in 2019, the culture is so untouched and so untouristified.
Yeah.
And that was really magical, that you really get to feel how wine is so integrated into the everyday lives of people. I mean, they even say the Georgian script, which is completely unique, not derived from any other script, it resembles the grapevines. If you go Google it,
That's so
you
beautiful.
will see the curliness, and so that is where
Yeah,
we wanted to go and just experience the birthplace.
It's like a pilgrimage. It's like
Beautiful.
this is where wine was born.
This is
I
where
want
it was
to
born.
I want to
wanna
go
be here.
understand
Yeah.
what it's like there. And I will say in the same breath that we might find in 10 years that 50 kilometers away that there's another site that's a little bit older and it's in Azerbaijan, and that doesn't make Georgia's discovery any less relevant. It doesn't, and it doesn't mean that Azerbaijan is not relevant. It's just there are these parts. Likely wine was born in this part of the world,
Right.
which is completely unexplored, or not completely, but mostly unexplored, and it's worthy of our attention and
Absolutely.
exploration. And that's why we went. That's why we shot the documentary
Right.
there, and yeah.
And it's not a place that many people pay attention to and know
I'll-
about.
I'll throw in one extra fun tip
Yeah.
is that you were saying, orange natural
Yeah.
wine is such a new fad. Well, evidence shows that the wine that they made 8,000 years ago was an orange wine. So it's not actually that
Right.
new.
Yeah. It's just new to us.
Right, it's new to us, but the Georgians have been doing it
Yeah.
for 8,000 years, so orange wine. So
Yeah.
why do you both love, this is, a dumb question, a no-brainer, but not everyone is like us. So where does your love from wine come from? I'll start with Ashwin and then Savannah.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate enough to travel a lot as a kid.
Yeah.
Like my parents loved to travel, and so we were kind of bounced around in cool places in the world, and I wanted to stay in the room and eat chicken fingers and play my Game Boy. That's all I wanted. And there was a certain point, I can't pinpoint when it was, where I realized I actually want to experience the place that I'm in and not just eat frozen
Right,
chicken fingers
right.
and play Game Boy. And so I think, with that backdrop, when I was transitioning my career a bit from purely technology and finance into something more artistic and creative, I was looking at I made a short list of things that I loved to do. And basketball was on that list, and guitar was on that list, and food and wine, and I kind of went through a process of elimination. I'm like, well, I'm not playing in the NBA. I think that ship has sailed. I'm not going to be a rock star. So let's cross that one off. And so what was left was food and wine.
You
And
never know that. Listen,
you know what?
never give up on your dreams, but just
Fair.
but continue.
A little bit of practicalness when I was doing that exercise. So, so it was I was left with food and wine, and thanks to my mom, I was good in the kitchen. I love to cook, and so I was like, I want to go learn more about wine. And as soon as I started learning, I realized I can spend a lifetime. I could spend 100 lifetimes, and it won't even be a drop in the bucket in terms of how much there is to learn. And and the last thing I'll say is it just connects you to so many other disciplines and parts of the world. So wine has allowed us to travel. It's taught us new languages. We've met a lot of interesting people through it. So it's a love affair that's just grown deeper with time.
And you, Savannah?
Yeah, I think, my answer really feeds off of Ashwin's response, and that wine for me is art that you get to drink. It's great that it has alcohol, that's an added benefit, but it's really like a bottle of wine represents culture and history and language and people, and really my love affair for wine has come from getting to know the story behind every wine that I taste, because it is sometimes just a drink, but sometimes it can be, a beautiful history and a way to just experience one person at a time who decided to make something, and getting to know why they decided to make the choices they did, or and I think that is just magic.
Yeah.
I think that's the magic of wine.
I love that you said that, because I don't think many people think about sort of the story, the people behind it, It's obviously something that is very highlighted in the documentary, but even during the tasting, when you're there and you're talking about a producer and the person, right? And, you're telling people, this wine I love that you said that. It's a work of art. Unfortunately, it's ephemeral, but it's not, because it does stay with you. And so then you do go on and you say, wait, I remember I tasted that wine, and I remember that sensation in my mouth, and I'd like to try and, reproduce that. So it's a really beautiful gift.
Yeah.
I think another beautiful thing about it is it doesn't last.
Yeah, that is why it's so beautiful, right?
You're gonna drink it, the bottle's gonna go away.
Right.
But what's left can be so beautiful as well.
I agree. And of course, all the experiences associated with it, and hopefully you're drinking it in a situation where you're going to want to, you remember fondly that night, and you'll say, wait, how many times, I try to remember to take pictures, bottles I've had to remember to write. I used to write them down, and now I get a little forgetful and I don't do it, but I say it's okay in the end, because I want to, if I remember it, I'll remember it. But the important thing is that I remember sort of everything that moment and that bottle and, drinking it brought with it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'll add, building on what you said, there are some wines will touch us more than others. The ones that do will remember.
Yeah.
Because I work in wine, I used to be very meticulous. I carried a diary with me always, and I'd take a lot of notes. And over time, I realized that I was taking something that I loved and turning it into something very work-like. And I realized somewhere along the way, it's nice just to allow your memory to function the way it's meant to function, which is that the things that are important will remain.
Exactly.
And the other thing I'll add is there are some bottles that are so special that you taste the wine and you understand something about the person that made it when you taste it.
Absolutely.
And that's actually
even if you haven't met them.
Even if you haven't met them. And that's actually what inspired a lot of our travels. I remember tasting Iago's wine during a tasting. I was leading a tasting. Often I'll pour wines I've never tasted because it keeps it fresh and interesting. I poured a sip of Iago's wine. I just took like 30 seconds in front of a room full of people. I just couldn't believe what was in that glass, and I had a vision of what this person would be like. And in my head, I'm like, I want to go meet him. I want to shake his hand and understand his philosophy on wine and life. And that's kind of what took us to Georgia, and we had a similar thing with Hungary, which is the wine that you tasted at the tasting.
Which was excellent. And so, which I never would have tasted. And then there's also, even living in Italy, which is so different in terms of the wine culture, but there is snobbery here too, and then there's the eternal competition between France and Italy and whatever. I have to hide when I buy French bottles because I'm afraid I'll be judged, and again, we go back to the champagne.
Yeah.
As we're coming to the end of our conversation, it might seem to a lot of people like a no-brainer, right? That you chose to stay in Italy. Okay, you love wine, the quality of life is excellent, blah, blah, blah. But I really want to get down to the why you have decided to plant your roots here for now. That's one part of the question. And part two is, if you'll share with us a couple of your favorite Italian wines or local Tuscan wines, because, you know, I don't like to admit that I don't like Chianti. I told you, I really don't like Chianti. And so that's another thing I have to sort of be very secretive about. It's not that I don't like all of them. There's some that I like Riservas, but you know, it's not my go-to, okay? What are your go-to wines here in Italy? And also, why did you say, okay, Italy?
You want to go first, Amore, or should I go?
I think maybe you should go.
Okay.
Sure. It's one of those things you can't really put into words. We'll try. It's more like a feeling in your heart and your gut. I think the moment we got here, it just felt right. It just everything in you is saying this is where you're supposed to be right now. And I can list off the language is beautiful and I love speaking it. It makes me happy. The wines are amazing. The quality of life is wonderful. You can go to most bar cafes and get a coffee that's a good coffee.
Yeah.
Almost always it's a good coffee. The food, I mean, the whole world travels to this country to eat. Yeah. So, those are like, all of those feel like ancillary points. Those aren't the central point.
Yeah.
The central point is when I'm here, I just feel my best self. And so why would I go anywhere else?
I love that. I love it. And it's exactly how it was for me as well. Yeah.
I think we have a similar story, and I know we were talking offline before we started recording, but we both have very separate memories of being young and traveling to Italy and not knowing why, but something resonated.
I love that.
And so to be able to come back and have it grow, and you know, in 2019 I had my family come and visit. My dad says, I've never seen you like smile so big or be so happy. That's just a symptom of what Ashwin was talking about, is like this gut feeling that you can't ever, I don't think I'll live here my whole life, I'll never be able to explain to anyone why here. And I think that's the beauty of it.
And for the record, I think a lot of our friends and family think we're crazy.
Oh yeah,
Because they can't, you can't,
I know.
you like explain all the facts and they're like, what? And I'm like,
I
dude,
know.
it just feels right. And that's all I got.
And that's and it's the same for me. I can't tell you why, but when I stepped foot in Florence for that first time when I was, 19 years old, I wasn't even 19, I think. And I was just like, okay, I need to be here. Yeah. And so, I understand that inexplicable pull. Nice. But not everyone does. A lot of people think I'm crazy too. Your go-to wines.
Yeah, so we drink a ton of Podere Capaccia, which is from Rada, our good friend Allie Morgan. Yeah, she makes it. We call it, quote unquote, our house wine.
It's so good. It's so good. Yeah. Thank you, Allison. It's so good.
Yeah, thank you, Allison.
It's just such a good house wine.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I want to honor.
She does ship to the U.S.
Yeah.
So
and I want to honor that when I say house wine, I put it in air quotes because it's not poor quality. It's just affordable and it's phenomenal. It's just delicious.
Drink goes down so well.
So we drink a lot of that.
I would also recommend a Pomona. Our friend Monica makes Pomona. That's actually where we got married, on her vineyard, in between the vines. So Monica has a beautiful wine that we'd recommend.
Yeah, that's in Castellina and Chianti. And then I love Chianti and Chianti Classico and Sangiovese. I want to say that because I do know what you're referring to, where you kind of got to, what I'm about to say, I'm already a little bit like, can I say this in Toscana? But I've been gravitating more towards Nebbiolo recently. Yeah. And so... Yeah.
I told Allison, I've told Mary Shea, Porcetto di Castellina, I tell all my friends who produce wine in Chianti that I'm not a huge fan. It's not my go-to. I appreciate it. I like northern wines. I especially like wines from the Veneto and Piemonte reds. I'm a huge fan of Amarone. But here in Tuscany, and I told Allison this, and she's like, I'm going to make you change your mind. I love the Super Tuscans from southern Tuscany, from the Etruscan. Bolgaris are just, for me, those are my go-to wines.
Got it.
That whole region for me is pure magic.
Wow. Awesome. We have different tastes.
We
You and
do.
I.
Evidently, you don't like
I don't.
You're not a fan.
No, it's not.
Not at all.
No.
Well, I would like to say we do have a really good friend who also works in wine, and he has your taste in wine. And it's one of the best things. We go sit down to eat dinner, and he'll come over and say, I don't really like this wine. You're going to love it. And he opens it, and we're like, you're right, we love it.
See?
And so we have this amazing back and
nice.
forth of like you said in the beginning, wine is subjective.
Very subjective.
And so that's the beauty of
Right.
it, and just knowing what you like and don't like
Right.
can
Yeah.
help.
Right.
And then it becomes this joke where if we find a wine we both like, or if you and I were to sit down and we found some wines that we both like, that becomes even more fun.
Exactly.
It's like, whoa, we have really different tastes, but we can agree on these things, and I wonder why. What is it about it?
Exactly.
So,
And we can always agree on bubbles.
for sure.
And
That's
we'll
for
always
sure.
start with bubbles.
Definitely.
But I want to thank you both for coming today. I've learned so much. I learned so much at the tasting. I recommend that everybody sign up for your course, and we'll put all the information on how to access the course, how to have tastings with you, to keep up with all these wonderful things that you're doing. So we'll put all of that in the show notes. Hopefully, maybe you'll come back in a couple of months.
With pleasure.
Love to.
With who knows what kind of news. And I just wish you the best of luck with what you're doing. I think it's great. And I think you both just made very courageous, unpinned moves by coming here. And I just wish you the best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much for having us on the podcast. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, this is a
Really
treat.
enjoyed it.
This is a real treat. Thank you.
I loved it. Grazie a voi. Thank you once again for tuning in to this week's episode of 15 with Fosca and for continuing to do so. Grazie mille e alla prossima volta.